Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our third technical session. We had a fantastic second technical session on impact of GST on manufacturing sector. Now let us hear the impact of GST on service sector. Being a service capital of the country, Bangalore, we are in, it is the most important sector we need to learn. To share knowledge in this sector, in this session, we have an eminent advocate, K.S. Naveen Kumar. May I request C.A. Ravindranath to escort the speaker onto the dais. Also welcome him with a floral bouquet. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with a round of applause. Thank you, C.A. Ravindranath. It is my pleasure to introduce the speaker to this august gathering. Sri K.S. Naveen Kumar is a lawyer specializing in central excise, customs and service tax matters. He is qualified a BCom graduate from Guru Nanak College, Chennai, LLB from Sri Jagadguru Renukacharya College, Bangalore, ML from Annamalai University. Practicing as a lawyer since the year 2001 and worked in the chamber of an eminent lawyer, Mr. K.S. Ravishankar, for 16 years before starting his independent practice in the year 2013. Specializes in indirect taxes litigation and consulting and has appeared before various tribunals, courts and legal forums. Many cases argued by him are reported in leading law journals and reports. He was the Vice Chairman, Indirect Taxes of Central Taxes and Banking Committee of FKCCI from 2007 to 2015. Presented papers on indirect taxes including goods and service tax and other topics across the country in many seminars, conferences, workshops, study circles organized by reputed organizations, institutions including ICAI, ICSI, FKCCI, CII, IAMB, Associum, CBEC. He was a member of subgroup appointed by Indirect Tax Committee of ICAI to draft Unified Code for Central Indirect Taxes in the year 2012. He was also a part of the subgroup constituted by ICAI in 2014-15 for drafting transition provisions for GST, based on which a booklet has been released by ICAI recently. He has co-authored a book titled Goods and Service Tax, a primer published by Alter Quer CCH, New Delhi. The second edition will be published shortly. His other areas of interest are philosophy, spirituality and music. More than that, a fascinating individual. Please once again welcome Advocate K.S. Naveen Kumar.
Good afternoon. At the outset, I thank the CA Institute for inviting me to this important program on goods and service tax. And as the theme of the seminar itself would suggest, it relates to the impact on various sectors like manufacturing sector, services sector, and Madhur is going to speak on the VAT related issues. It is said that in life there are two certainties. One is death, for which you don't require seminar. Probably the only person who spoke about the art of dying was Osho. Otherwise you have art of living and others thinking about it. The other certainty is taxes. Plural. From cradle to graveyard you have so many types of taxes. Like human being, every tax has to die. So come April 2017, we may have to bid adieu to various existing taxes like central excise to a large extent. It will be limited to few categories of goods, petroleum products, tobacco products. You have to bid adieu to major portion of the VAT laws. Entertainment tax will not be there, service tax will not be there. Many other laws like entry tax is not there. So many taxes will die after GST comes. That is why they say that it is a paradigm shift in indirect tax. And this paradigm shift is happening during our lifetime. I don't think you will see this paradigm shift for the second time in your lifetime. And that is where, as committed professionals, we are supposed to look at the law. In a way, the government is transparent. They have already released the model law in June 2016. And prior to that, you had this first discussion paper, white paper, constitutional amendment bills. And they have also released certain business processes. They have also released the rules and the formats of various returns, etc. recently, about 15 days back. But only thing which happened there was they released it and wanted our comments within 2 days. I don't know whether it was they thought that we are so fast or it was an empty formality, I don't know. As the time comes, April 2017, I also acknowledge the presence of my the other speaker, the next speaker, Mr. Madhur Halalka. I asked him, April 2017 will come. We are very close to it. But is there a possibility to introduce GST in April 2017? It's a big question. Government is trying to push it. But when I talk to our clients, whenever they come and sit before us, they just ask, what is GST, sir? This is the first question. So when you explain it briefly in 2 minutes, next question is, when will it come? Moment you say April 2017, they don't ask any other question. Probably they think that April 2017 is a long time and they can wait for it. But it is not so. If they have to prepare for GST in April 2017, then so many things have to happen now, right now. I had the benefit of listening to Sai Prasad sitting at my residence. Now that you have this live streaming, he was expounding threadbare the transition provisions which are there. What happens to various aspects. Now if you look at the transition itself, apart from whatever is stated in the law is what you are required to comply. The first thing they have to change is their employees, are they in a position to migrate to GST? Existing laws itself they are not understood. Some of them are happy because new law is coming, we will forget the old law if it is there in the upper chamber. The second thing is, it is going to be an IT driven law, as I can understand. And in our country, there are many people who do not know what is computer or laptop. We have such people. Of course, we are in a tech capital, therefore we are talking big things about the information technology, GST and so on and so forth. But are they in a position to embrace technology? Because each and every removal of goods or supply of goods and each and every supply of services have to be reflected in the IT portal, which is going to be maintained by the government. It is not like the olden days where you will look at your accounts only at the end of the year to find out what has happened. For income tax purpose, you can work like that. But for GST, every transaction is going to be monitored. And as you go on, I will also tell you about how the matching of credit is going to happen. Sai Prasad was also talking about it. Are they prepared to migrate to a technology-driven law? Is another question. So whenever you pose questions to even big companies, they have difficulties in answering this question whether their employees are prepared. Ultimately, you have to look at the employees who are going to work and go to the department and see. There also, of course, people who are qualifying now, IRS and IAS, they know computers, they are used to it. But there are mid-senior and senior people in the department who cannot even switch on the laptop. They have to call someone to do that. So is the department prepared to migrate to particularly in a state like let us say Bihar or other places, Madhya Pradesh or Northeast? Karnataka are far ahead. Karnataka state is far ahead when it comes to technology because we have developed that technology over a period of time. Many officers come and get trained here. When I even talk to our people, department officers say they are quite well prepared. But what about other states? I am doubtful. And one more thing which is going to happen when GST comes is that the services sector is also going to be administered by the states. For the first time, they will get the power to tax services sector. And let me tell you, the state is 23 years behind. 23 years behind. So 1994 you had the service tax law. Even now, the IRS has not understood service tax law properly, although it has been there for 23 years. And you go and sit in the tribunal, about 70 to 80% of the cases relate to service tax. There is a huge pendency. I am told as per last year's statistics about 1 lakh cases are pending. So are we prepared? Is the department prepared to embrace GST at this juncture is also something which we have to look at. Anyway, assume it comes in April 2017, there is no time left. That is why even Institute is conducting so many programs and we are witnessing various discussions on GST in public forum. So what I have thought about for the next 1 hour or so, I think we are running late by about 10 to 15 minutes. I will try to increase the run rate. But I cannot assure you that I am MS Dhoni. I will just take you through, in fact my friend Madhur was also saying that if you discuss services alone, you require 1 day or 2 days to discuss. So each sector is different. So we will be only scratching the surface and I have just compiled random thoughts. When we go ahead with various slides, I have just put the random thoughts. It is impossible to go in a sequence. We will also look at the impact on substantive law and procedures and key areas. What is supply and what is supply without consideration, what is deemed to be supply of services or goods. Of course, Sai Prasad has discussed and some aspects even Madhur may discuss about it. Then I will also keep some time for our interactive session. As we all know, GST has been introduced in many countries. It is not something which we have invented. Although we have been talking about GST since, actively talking about it from 2007 onwards. The concept of GST which was developed and designed by the economists was very attractive. I am using the expression was. So it was very attractive when you read the first discussion paper and other aspects. It was very attractive. Then it got into the political battle. You know how many years it took to pass the constitution bill itself. We have taken more than 5 or 6 years to do that. Then the drafting part has been taken over by the bureaucrats, executive. And if you look at the draft model law which has been released, the moment I saw it, I didn't read the supply definition or taxable supply or whatever. I just went to the administration part of it. Because that is where the interface with the department comes. If you want to know how fair the law will be, you have to first go and see the administrative part of it. I don't think many people have gone deep into that and analyzed the provisions. I think it starts somewhere from 48 or 49, audit. And then it goes on to other provisions like recovery of tax and liability in special cases. even after death of a person, recovery can happen from legal heirs. There have been cases in the past where the High Court, Karnataka, in a case which was argued by me, High Court said that you cannot issue a show cause notice after the death of a person. Prashanti case which is reported. And there have been cases where they say that you cannot enforce a demand on the legal heirs or successor. Now what has happened in the process is, I would say when you look at the model law, they call it as model law, but to me it occurred that it is not a role model law. This was not the law which we were expecting. It was a big disappointment for me when I read the model GST law. Because what has happened is, it is an admixture of various existing laws. A khichdi has been made and now they call it as GST. So if you look at it holistically, some provisions are picked up from excise, some are picked up from service tax, some come from VAT law, and some are introduced to overcome past judgments, and there you have the model GST law. We have been making frantic efforts to represent to the government on various aspects, and through associations, even institute has done that. So we still hope that this is not the final law. And if you ask me, the entire law has to be rewritten. Are they prepared for it? I do not know. Some people say that you can always introduce amendments, but can you change the fabric of the law after it is introduced? You buy cotton material, whatever you do out of it will be cotton fabric, cotton. It cannot change into leather or whatever. So, disappointing model law is in our hands. If you look at the change, goods and service tax is going to be destination-based consumption tax. If you look at the Supreme Court judgment in All India Federation of Tax Practitioners, when the Supreme Court expounded the meaning of service tax and nature of service tax, they expressed the same view, saying it is destination-based consumption tax. And in GST, we are going to have two components. It is going to be a single levy using two statutes, one state and another one with the central law. And you will have a CGST component and SGST component. If it is interstate or interstate transaction supply, then it is going to be IGST. So that is the basic understanding on which we are going to proceed. While on this aspect, I would like to point out one thing, which Sai was also briefly mentioning. Suppose you are not determining the place of supply or the time of supply. Suppose you don't recognize a particular transaction as interstate and pay it as intrastate, you had it because it goes to a different account. So therefore, you may be paying it to the government, but it goes into the wrong account. So there will be a lot of difficulty. So identifying the place of supply of goods or services is very important in the context of GST. As we go on, I will explain what is interstate and intrastate. Then you have this GST and portal, which I already explained. Then the ratification of bill happened. Everything happened in quick succession. After the constitutional amendment bill was passed by the Rajya Sabha, many steps were taken. And they also went to the extent of notifying the constitutional provisions, amendments. It led to a controversy. In fact, I remember one weekend was spent in many forums only discussing whether central excise law has gone because of notifying all the constitutional amendments. So 1884 would talk about the excise on goods manufactured or produced in India. After the amendment, it is restricted to few products. So the question came whether there is an authority now to impose. Government in a knee-jerk reaction said that we will introduce amendments, and later on they clarified that nothing is required at this stage. But the question is still open. Suppose a person does not has not paid tax, he may raise this issue saying that there is no authority under the constitution to collect excise duty. I also wrote an article which was published on this aspect. Now there were various notifications issued about 10 days back notifying the GST rules in respect of registration and certain other procedures, and they also released the formats, and unfortunately only 2 days was given to make representations. Still we made efforts from FKCCI to do that. And if you look at the law, the registration and other things which Sai was mentioning, it is all PAN-based registration. And when it comes to registration, for each state you may require a registration. Earlier service sector had an option to have single registration, centralized registration, if they had the centralized billing or accounting system. Now with the advent of GST, that option of having centralized registration is lost. So imagine, let us say a person has 28 branches. You have to have separate registrations across all those states, and can everything happen in the head office? It is impossible. You have to recruit people for that. So the compliance cost is going to increase, and even the returns, number of returns will also increase because of the number of registrations a person would have. CGST is defined. It means tax levied under the CGST Act. By Act I mean the model law. SGST also is defined to mean the tax which is levied under the SGST Act, because the same model law is going to be adopted by the states, and they will also enact laws for the purpose of enabling collection of SGST. Then you have a separate IGST Act which also came as a part of the model law, and IGST is defined to mean IGST which is collected under the IGST Act. Now there are certain expressions, I am not going into all the definitions, there are so many. There are certain definitions which are important. I thought I should highlight it before I go into the discussion part. Business is defined in an inclusive manner. You look at the way in which it is couched, the definition is inclusive. And they say that it includes any trade, commerce, manufacture, occasion, profession, trade, or any other similar activity, whether or not it is for pecuniary benefit, and any transaction which is incidental or ancillary to clause A, then any transaction in the nature of A, whether or not there is volume, frequency, etc., club, association, so mutuality principle is also given up to a certain extent. Admission for a consideration of persons to any premises. So if you compare this definition with the existing definition which you have in VAT laws, earlier there were controversies on certain activities. Let us say I am a manufacturer of some engineering goods. I may run a small canteen for the benefit of employees. People would take a view that it is not my main activity, I am not engaged in that activity. Of course, there are certain decisions which were rendered by the courts, including TDS, where they said that that will also be covered. The matter has gone to Supreme Court. So now that possibility does not arise because it says includes any trade, commerce, etc. So it is defined in a very wide manner. Therefore, any activity which you do in your business would be covered by the definition of business in the Act. So it is going to create a lot of, it will set at rest many controversies which were there in the earlier regime. I also get a feeling that it is drafted like a one-sided law. When you read it, whatever you want is not there. Whatever government wants is there. Because basically it was drafted by the bureaucrats. Look at the definition of service. This is going to create a lot of difficulty. given the fact that immovable property related transactions, stamp duty is not subsumed. So now what they say, service means anything other than goods. Anything other than goods is service. So they may try to include various aspects within the ambit of service. Earlier in the service tax law, look at the definition. Any activity for a consideration, and within the definition of service there are certain exclusions, like service given by employee to the employer. Now also there are certain exclusions. And whatever was mentioned in the negative list was outside the ambit of service tax. There were certain activities which were defined as declared service in the present regime. Now there is equivalent schedule 2 which would treat certain activities, deem certain activities as service. The service definition has become wider in scope. So anything which they cannot fit it within the ambit of goods, they would try to say that this is service. So that is the ramification of this definition. Apart from this definition, you should read this along with schedule 1 and 2 of the modern GST law. Schedule 1 would also talk about the transactions or supplies without consideration. I will show some of those aspects as we go on. It is very interesting. I will give you some examples which we may have to encounter in our life. Now look at the definition of supply. This again is an inclusive definition. It says supply includes. So what is supply? You go by general meaning of what is supply. It can mean providing, it can mean giving, it can mean taking, acquiring. So supply includes all forms of supply. So they widen it further. All forms of supply of goods and services. And such as, this expression such as, if you remember, was interpreted in the context of input service to widen the scope of service prior to 1/4/2011. Later on it was curtailed. Now this such as would mean, it is only illustrative. First of all, they say supply includes all forms of supply. When you say all, you don't require it such as at all. But they want to widen it further. They say such as, illustrative list is given. Sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal. Please look at this expression, disposal. When I say sale, there should be one more person who is buying. When I say transfer, there should be a person who is receiving something. When I say barter, there is one more person who is thought of. But in the context of disposal, there may not be a requirement. When I go to the schedule 1, I will tell you in what context the disposal may come into play. So this is very wide. Disposal, lease, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. This is only the first clause in the definition. Then it says importation of service, whether or not for a consideration. Here again they say consideration may not be there, and whether or not in the course of furtherance of commerce or business. Suppose you have a friend who is an architect, a famous architect in England, and you are building your residence. Suppose you take the services. It is nevertheless supply. He will not charge anything for that. No consideration. But since it is importation of service without consideration, and it may not be meant for your business or commerce, still it is treated as supply. Look at the ramification of this. One thing which is defined. Supply is defined in a very wide manner. Then they don't stop there. They say supply specified in schedule 1. Made or agreed to be made without consideration. So consideration earlier, if you look at the definition of service, any activity for a consideration. The consideration was attached and was very important for the purpose of considering it as a service. But this consideration need not be there in the context of GST law, still it would be regarded as supply of services or goods. Then they say Schedule 2. There are certain matters which are referred there, where a deeming fiction is created. What is a deeming fiction in law? A deeming fiction is, they are saying something which is not real or not perceived as real in the normal sense. By a deeming fiction, even gender can be changed. I am not saying this. Even Supreme Court, when they expounded the meaning of a deeming fiction in some case law which I read recently, they said you can even change the gender. Possible. Deeming fiction is, once you give a deeming fiction, the Supreme Court says that you have to take it to its logical end. You cannot stop midway. Suppose something is deemed, it is actually goods, but the law says it is service. So you have to treat it as service only. And whatever consequences arise because of the deeming fiction, you have to give effect to that. That is how you interpret a deeming fiction under law. Then where a person acting as agent, who for an agreed commission or brokerage either supplies or receives any goods or services on behalf of any principal, the transaction between such principal agents should be treated as supply. So this is the definition of service, the supply, which is there in the modern GST law. And they don't stop there. You look at this clause 3, which is very important. They say that central or state government may, upon recommendation of the council, council means the GST council, specify by a notification transactions that are to be treated as supply of goods and not as supply of services, supply of service not as supply of goods, or neither supply of goods nor services. So even the central, the GST council can recommend such a thing, and either the central or the state government can notify. When I read this expression center or state, I got a doubt. What if only the state notifies? What will be the implication under the other law? So we will have, so they have to work in tandem. Probably the GST council would say both of you notify, otherwise there will be a serious problem. One thought which has been there ever since the GST concept is being discussed is that if you look at the model law also, you will find many places where they say upon recommendation of the council or to be recommended by the council. Many crucial things like a rate, like exemption, like these provisions, what is supply in certain cases. Are we heading for a law where the parliament or state legislature's supremacy to enact laws is given up? This is a question which always arises in my mind. In fact, I had an occasion to discuss about it a year back with a senior professor of National Law School. He also had the same view. Because if you look at the basic structure of the Constitution, which is also embedded in the preamble as expounded by the Supreme Court in Keshavananda Bharati's case and a series of other decisions, you cannot do something to curtail the powers of the legislature. Now, suppose all these provisions say upon recommendation of the GST Council. One may say that it is only recommendatory, but if they don't recommend, the parliament may reject it, but can they introduce something on their own? The answer is in the negative, because the law does not enable it. Because for everything they have to go to the GST Council. So in a way, the parliament or state legislatures' supremacy of laying down enacting the laws is probably lost in the GST context. Probably this will be the first case which may arise in the context of GST law. Now that the provisions are notified, constitutional provision, if someone wants, they may even go and challenge it on the ground that it is against the basic structure. We all remember what happened to that NJSE bill, judicial appointments bill. It was shut down because certain other people were also asked to appoint judges. So whether this will lead to constitutional issue, I am not saying. What I am saying is final. The debate is wide open. Probably that will be the first case when the court would deal with the matter. Now look at one more interesting thing. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, supply of any branded service by an aggregator as defined in section 43B under a brand name or trade name owned by him shall be deemed to be a supply of the said service by the said aggregator. In fact, there is a special provision carved out under 43B read with the other provisions which also talk about tax collection at source, which has to be remitted to the government, and the tax paid by the portal owner, that IT portal owner, would be available as credit to the supplier of the goods or services in e-commerce transactions. I will take you to some of the important aspects, the dealing fiction which I was pointing out. Look at this second schedule. It talks about any transfer of goods or of right in goods or of undivided share in goods without the transfer of title thereof as a supply of services. Similarly, a lease, tenancy, easement, license, etc. of a building is treated as supply of services. This is a dealing fiction. Why this dealing fiction is brought is to ensure that there is no classification disputes under the GST law. Whether it is left-facing bird or right-facing rabbit, you need not decide. So the law itself says, if it is this activity, it is treated as goods, or if it is other activity, it is treated as services. In a way, it is good, because the law itself puts an end to the controversy which was there in the earlier regime. And the treatment or process applied to another person's goods, like job work, it is treated as services. So they want to avoid a controversy to decide whether it is in the nature of supply of goods or services. Then, on the direction of a person carrying on business, goods are put for personal use, for him or for another person, for a consideration or not, is a supply of services. Suppose the owner says that a particular business asset, let us say he gives it to his employee for use. It is temporarily being put to use for personal purpose. That is treated as service transaction. And if you look at the present declared service definition which is there in the service tax law, all those entries they pick up and put it in the second schedule, and they say that it will be deemed to be services. But there are three changes. One is the services given by a restaurant. Earlier, VAT was also applicable and service tax was also applicable. Now they call it as service. Then works contract, the goods portion would suffer VAT, service portion would suffer services. Now they say everything is treated as services. Then transfer of right to use. These were three areas where there was a lot of controversy. Transfer of right to use would attract VAT, whereas mere right to use attracted service tax. So in a case where people were paying VAT, you have a show cause notice under service tax law, or where people have paid service tax, they have a VAT notice. So to resolve this issue, many people used to approach the High Court because two governments were staking claim to the same transaction. So to avoid this controversy, they have said that this is all deemed to be services. This is one major change which has happened. I think litigation would reduce to a large extent because of this. Then one more thing which I wanted to show it to you, Schedule 1, where there is a supply without consideration. The first clause, you see the last limit there, 31C. permanent transfer or disposal of business asset. I have a business asset. It is permanently transferred. There may not be a consideration. I may just give it to someone. It is treated as supply, although there is no consideration. Similarly, disposal. When I say transfer, there is someone who is receiving it. I have goods, business assets, but it is no longer used. I scrap it. It is disposed of. Then also they say that it will be in the nature of supply of services. So schedule 1 is important because even though there is no consideration, it is treated as service, supply of service. Then temporary application of business asset to personal use. You may also have this. Even a chartered accountant may face this. Suppose I take my car to drop my children at school and then proceed to office. Are they going to say it is temporary application of business asset for personal use? It is another matter how the department will find out, all those things will come. But can you extend the definition to such an extent where the administration is virtually impossible? Or suppose you take an employee, car is given for office purpose, at the end of the day he has to go and get dropped at a residence. Yes sir.
The rest of the world has already sorted this. They all have logbooks which are supposed to be compulsorily maintained, however difficult it is, for the purposes of difference between personal use and business use.
Okay.
If you have a vehicle,
Okay.
whether it is UK or Italy, no matter how difficult it is, you are expected to maintain. If you do not maintain, you are penalized.
Okay. So we have to become like Italians and Britishers.
No, I'm saying the rest of the world has done this, and in India it's very difficult because we only use yachts and jets for personal use and treated it as business use.
No, that is why I am saying how the administration is going to be.
No, you see, the easiest thing is to pick on the jet. That we have never done. We've always picked on the motor car. That you are right in saying.
One thing, since you have pointed out that, I will also tell you that let us say in your income tax return, generally our auditors suggest, and we have been doing it for so many years, 1/5 self-disallowance. Is it? 1/5 or whatever, depending on how it is used. This disallowed, depreciation disallowed, petrol disallowed. So to that extent you are admitting that it has been used for personal purpose. So the department can directly go to your return and find out that you yourself are disallowed. Therefore there should be a supply to that extent. That is one way of finding out your own declaration, and it has been happening over a period of time. Suddenly you cannot stop disallowance because if you stop it, you will have an income tax notice. Is it? So that is one way they can find out. Then services put to personal use. Suppose you file your own wife's return. Generally we avoid because questions will be too many. Answers are not there. So let us say you have a firm, you will ask your partner to file the return. Nevertheless, it is the same business. So services which are put to personal use, and even if there is no consideration, it is treated as supply without consideration. I am just telling you how we ourselves will be affected by the way in which the law has been drafted. Then assets retained after deregistration. Suppose the business is closed, whatever assets are retained for personal purpose, of course it is going to be used by you. To the extent it is retained after deregistration, they say it is also treated as supply. So for that purpose again you have to register. So if you have any such asset, please dispose it off and then close the business. So that is one more thing which is there in the first schedule. Supplied by taxable person to any other person in the course or furtherance of business, even if there is no consideration. So this consideration which we are harping on for the last 23 years in the context of service tax law is virtually given up. So they are going to tax anything and everything, and I will also point out few aspects in the valuation law, how they will question you. Then services provided by the job worker shall not be treated as supply of goods. A clarification is there because of the special procedure which is envisaged in 43A of the model GST law which Sai Prasad was speaking about. Now let us go to one more important aspect, that is time of supply.
I have a question on
Yes,
this.
sir. Please.
In case of an ex-factory sale, what is the place of supply? Is it ex-factory or is it the place at which it is consumed?
You are asking in the context of manufacture.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You're saying I should have asked it in the previous session.
Anyway, if possible, we'll take it at the end. Let us not deviate from this topic. In fact, there have been decisions since you asked us. You are activating my thoughts. So, in the context of this SENVAT input service, we used to face this problem. Place of removal. Is it the factory, or if it is ex-factory? Probably you are asking in that context. Does it, if it is on FR basis, the sale happens at the doorstep of the purchaser, therefore the place of removal becomes his place, therefore transportation up to the place of removal I am eligible. All those concepts you have to revisit. Now in the light of the place of supply concept here, the time of supply, because unless you determine, because as the previous speaker was also pointing out, the tax payment depends on whether it is intrastate or interstate. So once you go wrong on that, then you have made payment to the government, but it has gone to some other account. So you will have difficulties. So in a way you have to forget the old law and revisit the new law. That is what I would say. Time of supply. Time of supply of services, if you look at the earlier context, the service tax law, we have something known as point of taxation rules 2011. Prior to that, it was all on realization basis. You realize the amount, then you remit the tax. But 2011 was a sudden change because GST was talked about from that time itself, and they wanted to move towards a GST regime, so they brought many of the changes in the old law, where the earliest point of time would be taken. For example, completion of service or invoice or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, gist of point of taxation rules. So here also, in the context of the model GST law, you have both time of supply of services and time of supply of goods. Time of supply of goods is there in section 12, whereas time of supply of services is talked about in section 12. I am not saying that point of taxation rules has been as it is adopted, but they have kept that as the basis to draft the provisions of section 13 of the law. For example, if you see clause A, they say the date of issue of invoice or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, if the invoice is issued within the prescribed period, or the date of completion of provision of service or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, if the invoice is not issued within the prescribed period. We had similar provisions in the context of point of taxation rules 2011. So they are probably inspired by that, because it was a joint exercise where even the central excise service tax officers also sat down to write the law. They have made some changes here and there. So time of supply is going to be a crucial factor which has to be decided. Then you will go to the concept of continuous supply of services, which are there in which is there in current service tax law. Almost the same definitions are adopted. Any service which is going to be provided for a period exceeding 3 months is treated as continuous supply of services, and to the extent of the service which is already complete, the particular event is over, they want to tax that particular activity. This is there in time of supply of services in section 13. If you look at the export of service, there is a particular definition for that. They put some conditions, and they say that the supplier should be in India, the recipient is outside India, The place of supply should be outside India, therefore you have to go back to the place of supply related provision which is there in the IGST Act. Time of supply is there in section 12 and 13 of CGST Act or SGST Act. For place of supply you have to go to IGST Act. And what is interstate or intrastate is defined in the IGST law. What they say is, suppose the location of the supplier and place of supply is different states, then it is treated as an interstate transaction. If the location of the supplier and the place of supply is within the state, then it is treated as intrastate transactions. Now a question would arise as what is the status of branches within the state? Is it supply of goods or services? Supply of services. At least supply of goods you can trace it because there is some movement of goods. Let us say you have a branch in Delhi and someone calls you and says that I am giving you an opinion on so and so transaction. Please give your advice, and you send some mail or you orally clarify, there may be a supply of service. And because each branch is separately registered outside the state, they are going to treat that as a different person and there will be a supply of services. But if it is within the state, the law says that you have single registration number, so you are not allotted two numbers. Two numbers are given only when it is a different business vertical. What is the business vertical is defined in the model law. They refer to your accounting standard 17 on segmental reporting. The same definition is imported into modern GST law. Probably they are guided by someone who knows accounting standards. So that is how they look at it. So if it is a different business vertical within the state having a different registration, that is also treated as supply of services. So if it is your own branch outside the state, then that is treated as supply of service. How they are going to administer, I am not very sure about that. How they are able to trace? Can they trace it through your, of course if emails are there, possible, but can they come and check every email in your office to see whether there is service which has happened? I don't think practically it is possible. Unless, as a friend pointed out, we also become so transparent in our affairs that everything is known to the department. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So, if I don't have an office, but we have people, because there are businesses where you don't have branch offices, but you have people, sales force which is working across India, and they are probably working with some other institution and providing services or facilitating services. So in those cases, will there be any requirement for registration?
I think the place of business has to be seen. Place of business is wide enough. Do they have some place to sit, or they go from your place and do the work and something?
Yeah, so they are field staff. So
I'll give one example which I was reading. In fact, when I was looking at this casual taxable person, let us say a chartered accountant goes to Bombay bench or tribunal, argues the matters and comes back, that becomes liable to tax. So it becomes a casual taxable person. The definition is so wide. So every time you go to some court or tribunal to do something and come back, you have to take this casual taxable person dealer's registration. Am I right, Madhu? So it is very wide. So you may have to look at that aspect also. So import of service is also in the same manner. I will point out one legal controversy on this aspect. Supplier is outside, recipient is in India, the place of supply should be in India. Again you go back to the IGST Act to determine what is place of supply. See the last limb, which is very interesting. Supplier and recipient should not be mere establishments of distinct persons. I will give one example in the present context. Then you will be able to understand what this means. Suppose I have a head office in Bangalore head office of a company in Bangalore. They have a foreign branch. Foreign branch is into software development. Head office sends money, transfers money every month to take care of the foreign branch. Expenses are incurred. You would have come across some decisions where the department would say, in the present regime, they say foreign branch is treated as separate entity and your head office is different. You are paying something, there is outflow of money, therefore that is chargeable under reverse charge. There have been decisions of the tribunal, including the Infosys and KPT Cummins, saying that it is created for a particular purpose. 64(1) of the service tax law says this act applies to whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. So what is taxable territory? Anything which happens within the territory of India. Now why this fiction is created is to ensure that whatever services are received abroad by the foreign branch are not taxed in India, for the mere reason that it is accounted ultimately in the head office books of accounts. So in that way, the courts, the tribunal was in a position to interpret this explanation which is there. Even the definition of service, if you see, the explanation is there. Interestingly here, what they say, supplier and recipient are not merely establishments of a distinct person. So in a way it is helpful for the assessee to say that that type of transaction is not treated as info. So it will solve those problems which are faced by the IT industry and other people who had branches abroad. So it is a welcome development. If you compare this with the export, in the export earlier regime it was there. Last bill if you see, not mere establishment of distinct persons. For example, I receive funds from foreign branch. I cannot say that I have done exports. That is what is conveyed by this. You cannot say that I have done export of service. But it was not there in the context of import. Now in the model law, probably they are giving effect to the decisions of the tribunal. They say that if it is mere establishments of a distinct person, it will not be treated as import of service. This is a welcome move which will solve many disputes which were there in the earlier regime. Look at the definition of input service. It means any service. They could have stopped at this, I would have welcomed it. Because the basic fabric of this GST law as conceived and designed by the economists is that there should be a seamless credit system. But if you look at the definition of input service, capital goods and also the inputs, when you read it, I think all the old SEMAT rules are brought into the Act itself now. At least earlier we would argue rules cannot override the Act. Now we cannot do that. So, in place of seamless credit system, it appears to be, seems to be less credit system. So again you are getting into the system of restrictions on credit and saying that this will not be allowed, this will be disallowed, subject to exceptions as may be provided under this Act or the rules. So credit rules will also come which will have restrictions, and it should be used or intended to be used by a supplier for making an outward supply in the course or for furtherance of business. Then the concept of IST, we all know, even the present regime, it has been a boon for many associates because they are able to distribute credit. Even though some office of the manufacturer or service provider receives some invoice, that particular office will not have an output service. They are in a position to distribute it to other units where actually the production or manufacture happens, or there is a service tax output liability. So in GST regime also, you will have this ISD system which has been working well in the context of the service tax and excise. Now I would move on to certain key areas, highlight some of the impact areas of GST. Already it is 3:20. I think I have to wind up by what time? Your session is 3:45. Is it? 3:40. I will finish in about 5-7 minutes, and then I have to give some time for interaction. So the first thing impact is taxable event. What is the taxable event in GST? It is going to be supply. What is supply? We have seen. Supply is very wide. It includes all forms of supply, and it also includes certain things such as, that expression such as comes. And supply without consideration, deemed supply, everything is supply now. So the provision of service or manufacture or production, sale, everything is subsumed in GST law, in the definition of supply which we saw. Classification disputes have been there in the past. If you look at the pre-17-2012 pre-negative list based regime, service tax law started with 3 services, it became 120. And every time they would bring a new service because the department lost. They did not fit a particular service in the earlier definition. So they had to think of something new. Finally they gave up and brought one definition of service, but that gave rise to a serious problem because it was widely defined, activity for a consideration. There are some activities which were taxed under VAT law. So between the center and state there was a dispute whether this particular thing would attract tax or not. So in a way the assessees were caught between devil and deep sea, and in many cases they had to go to the court for finding out the correct liability. There are instances, there are interesting cases which I have come across where a particular person has paid VAT but service tax is demanded on that. Now let us say the adjudicator in the authority says service tax is payable. Then the amount which is lying with VAT will not come back. So you go to the court of equity under Article 226, they have equity jurisdiction, court of equity. They would say that please determine whether the center should get its due or not, or state should get it. So in cases where they have decided, the court has also ordered the VAT department to pay that money to the service tax department. Otherwise, as an individual or a company, you cannot ask them to do it, but the court can do. So the courts of equity can do that. So those type of cases also we have come across. So classification by and large will not be an issue unless they think of a different rate. Till now, we are battling with various rates. Sometimes we hear 18%, sometimes we say 20%, 22%. The next week rates will be decided. In the first meeting, there was a lot of debate on that. In the GST Council meeting, they were not able to decide on the rates. So hopefully by next weekend we will have something on the rates. So if they have multiple rates different for goods and services, again you will have disputes whether this is left facing bird or a right facing rabbit. I think the government should avoid such controversies. Then the definition of service which we have already seen, I think it requires an amendment. When you say that anything other than goods, Constitution also defines it in the same manner. Anything other than goods. So again you have to go back and do the amendment of the Constitution if you want to change it. That definition is a little dangerous. They have to suitably amend it. Then when it comes to valuation, if you look at the provisions of valuation, which Sai Prasad also explained it, for the first time, related person issue is brought into service tax. And for the first time even VAT. The concept of related person was unknown under service tax, under the VAT regime. It has been there since very long time under customs and excise law. There is a lot of case law development. But every time this related person fiction is brought, somehow or the other parties were able to establish that the price was not influenced by the relationship, and most of the cases the department would lose. You look at the statistics. But for the first time when you introduce it in the context of services and VAT, is it first of all required is my question, because every supply is going to be taxed. I sell it to a related person, you will sell it to someone else. That is also taxed, this is also taxed. Then why you should have that related person fiction at all. At some point of time it is going to be taxed. That is one explanation for that. The other explanation is, when we discussed it with other professionals, we get one more view that suppose I sell it within the state and that related person sells it interstate, then the character of the levy changes. Therefore, this related person fiction is required. But nevertheless, it is going to create a lot of difficulty in the context of the services, because in fact, even the State Department is going to administer GST law, and they have never interpreted this related person fiction in the past. So you will have a lot of disputes. One more interesting thing which I always ponder is that how the administration will happen, how the show cause notices will be resolved. I told you after section 49, up to 4950 we read. After that we have reserved it after the GST law comes. But that is where you get many doubts. Let us say there is an issue under issue relating to a particular transaction is supply or not. SGST authority issues a show cause notice. CGST authority may not issue. Can you argue that one department has accepted, therefore you should also accept? I don't have answers for this. Then let us say both of them issue show cause. But show cause notice is issued in alleging different things. Can you say that you yourself are not clear? See, the major thing in GST law everyone will understand, try to implement after 6 months, one year it will settle down. But the major thing which will, the impact of it, when the rubber hits the road, you will know how it is going to impact. Can the state authority and the central authority sit at one place and adjudicate something? Now itself there is a talk that you are the senior, I am IAS, you are IRS, you have to come and meet me. I am 1974 batch, you are 1985. All these talks are happening for a meeting. So imagine the fate of the assessee. You have to satisfy two different authorities. Their outlook is totally different. Will adjudication happen simultaneously? Show cause notice is issued. Are they going to sit together and adjudicate, or he will pass a separate order, the other fellow will pass a separate order, separate appeals? And you look at one more important thing, that revisionary jurisdiction under VAT law. Even the order passed by appellate authority can be reviewed by the additional commissioner. There is no such power under the excise or service tax law. So it will run into multiple proceedings. These are the real issues which the assessees have to face. After the return is filed, they will come for assessment or reassessment. That is where the interaction with the department will start. Till then it is only GSTN, which is probably a company which, as Justice Krishna would say, it has no soul to damn or no body to kick. So interaction is with the porter. After some time, when the real assessment proceedings, audits start, and parallel views are taken, multiple views are taken, multiple proceedings start. That is where we have to see whether the assessees are prepared to embrace this new law which is there. There is no talk about this, how they are going to adjudicate, and there was some talk that up to 1.5 crores it will be administered by the state. Some people said that it is only VAT assessees, some people say even service providers are going to be administered by them. There is no clarity on this. Every day, see, your understanding of GST law is as good as the last WhatsApp message which you receive. You are understanding it in a particular way. Suppose you go out and switch on your mobile, you will find 10 messages about GST, and some of them may be contrary to what I told you. That is why I told your understanding is as good as the last WhatsApp message which you receive. So it keeps on changing till the actual law is freezed and given to you. We will be only speculating on various things, but nothing should stop us from making recommendations. This is what we should do it till the law is notified. Then registration. I told you, within the state, one registration, unless it is a business vertical, different business vertical, you are given an option. But if it is different states, officers or branches, they have to register separately. So how many returns you have to file every month. See, service tax assessees were filing 6 months return. That itself will be belated in many cases. And that will require one more revision or revised return. That revised return option is not there in the context of GST law. So every month, one return is filed on 10, another return is filed on 15, and one more return is filed on 20th. When we confronted one of the joint commissioners in a seminar, he said that it is only one return filed on 3 different dates. And they said some auto-collation of data will be there. You feed one basic information, you go and sit in the next return. Anyway, you are going to sign it. Without application of mine, you cannot upload any return. So to that extent, and somebody, one of our chartered accountant friend, he, in a writer name, he said, you can do business whenever you find time, after complying with the GST law. When you are free, you can do business. Because 10th, one return, 15th, one return, then 20th, one more return. Then if you have ISD return, one more ISD, one more return, and annual return. So many returns are prescribed. I don't know. Of course, it is good for chartered accountants. As practitioners, you will have more work. And to that extent, imagine different branches headed by different people, following different methods. Are they in alignment? Are they taking the same stand in various states? These things are also important in the context of GST. Apart from whatever transition provisions which are mentioned in the law, which Sai Prasad was deliberating for a long time, there are certain issues like whether we are our IT preparedness, or have the staff being trained, or your records being updated. I have a friend of mine who is a chartered accountant, who is also here in this room. He is an expert in IT, in SAP or ERP. And he always tells that how important it is for the organization to completely revamp based on the law. Can you change the law, the IT on the basis of a model law, which may change any time? We don't know. There are different versions of the model law. Earlier, about 8 or 9 months back, suddenly one law was released. They said that was the 4th version or something. So this is one more version which we have. And when maybe in another 1 or 2 months we'll have one more version. Can you change the IT infrastructure within your company based on these draft rules? There are some countries where they gave about 1 or 2 years time to adjust to the new law. The law was enacted, it was not notified. Time was given to migrate. So now we are looking at April 2017. We have hardly about less than 6 months time to transit to GST. That is going to be a big task. Then demand of recovery. Being a litigation lawyer, I should also tell you about the impact. Can you have a law which does not prescribe any time limit for issue of show cause notice? You read section 51 of the GST law. There is a time limit for passing orders. They talk about 3 years or 9 months. Larger period is 5 years for passing an order. But for issuing show cause notice, there is nothing. That means it is open-ended. And there is one provision at the end of section 51, I think subsection 10 or so. It says, in any place in India, let us say that some issue crops up in litigation, and the matter is ultimately decided by the appellate forum, like a tribunal or a high court or supreme court. The time taken to decide the case, that is excluded for the purpose of adjudicating matters under the GST regime. Let us say after 20 years, a decision comes under GST law saying that this is supply of goods, and all the assessees have taken a stand based on a high court ruling that it is not supply. Since that Supreme Court ruling comes, the department is given a chance to reopen all the assessments for those type of assessees. It happens even in current regime. You take this Nokia issue, many of you may be privy to that. Centum case, the credit issue which is there in VAT law. So they are given an open-end, there is no limitation at all. They can open the issue because some issue in Assam goes to the Supreme Court. Since the law is common, they are going to reopen the assessments of all assessors. This is very dangerous. That particular, even if the department manages to retain all the provisions, at least that particular provision in the interest of trade and industry, they should make some change. And we have made efforts to intimate the authorities and government in various forums. Whether it happens or not, we do not know, but that is very dangerous. Please go and read the section 51 of the model GST law, you will understand what I am saying. Then what happens to the pending litigation? Matters are pending for various forums. Law gives some, they only talk about a case where some issue is decided now, it will be recovered as GST arrears with interest, etc. No credit, all those things they say. But as an assessee, when you migrate to a new system, a new law, old law has nothing to do with the GST system. So you have to take some crucial decisions. Your clients have to decide whether to contest a particular issue or pay it and close. My feeling is that some scheme is going to come, like what we had in income tax to clear all the backlog. Here also the government should formulate some Karmevar Samaran scheme or litigation resolution scheme. They should ensure that the litigation comes down. Otherwise, it is the officers will be busy deciding the old cases. Then who will decide the GST cases? So there should be some resolution scheme which can be expected when GST comes. Valuation, I already told you that about that related person fiction is coming there for the first time in the context of GST law. If my time is up, I have to keep about 5 to 6 minutes for interaction. Of course, even after my session, I will stay back for about 10-15 minutes. If you have any questions, you can ask. No questions means either you have understood everything.
The concept of related persons which is there is very intrinsic to the international system of taxation everywhere and even under the Income Tax Act. And India, being a kind of family-oriented society, always has preferred to do a preferential deal for its family members, kith and kin. The business concept of the West has been that whoever walks in through the door pays the full service. Now, we've been trying to say we want to be as good or as bad as them. In that context, how can we really avoid this concept when we accept everything in bits and pieces?
I didn't say that it should not be there. I only expressed my concern that it was not at all there in the context of VAT or service tax. And looking at the way in which supply definition is coined in our country, it is very wide. So is there a need to have related person fiction? It was relevant because under the excise law, there may not be sale, or even there may be sales to related person, as you also pointed out. So there was a need because beyond the stage of production or manufacture, the union was not able to collect excise. So the price was affected by the relationship. So they had to think of methods. This was one way of looking at it. But now that you are defining every supply as a taxable supply, is there a need to introduce this related person fiction in the context of GST? Is one thing which we may have to debate on.
See, you need to look at it that fundamentally we have never recognized the fact that a person, an assessee, this is a little out of context but is relevant, need not maintain books under income tax in the new regime because up to 50 lakhs, for example, service-paying professional need not have books. But the same assessee at the same time can come in and say, I have books and claim all the benefits under the GST Act. I can't see anywhere else in world this kind of drafting happening wherein both the acts are treated as watertight without looking at the ramifications of such provisions. Because on one side we say as a country we don't want black money, and on the other side we do this. And if we were to take the manufacturing side and talk of a 2 crore exemption without books, it seems to be even more interesting to look at.
Interesting observation. I have nothing to comment on that. It is very interesting. Yes, sir. Please. I am not able to hear you. Sorry. Can you please be louder?
One more question.
Who is that, sir? Yeah.
Sir, in the current existing service tax rules, point of taxation or place of provisions of service, it plays an important role, whether it is taxable or not. But in the existing, sorry, in the proposed GST, so how it plays a role for place of supply, or whether it is supply of goods or supply of service, why this much explanation is required? Anyway, it is a uniform tax. Either it is a supply of goods or service or place of supply. How it what is the important role of this?
I will explain it in 2 parts.
Yeah.
One is, why do you require to say that this is goods or services? That is one thing. That is where Schedule 2 comes into play. Assume Schedule 2 is not there. Then you will end up in a situation where you are not able to decide. Let us say some exemptions come or some concessional rates come on particular activity. Department will naturally look at it from revenue angle and say, no, this is not goods, this is services. This will give rise to disputes. It has happened in the past. So to avoid that, they want to be very clear. And now you have 2 different authorities, union and state administering the same GST. Union authority would say something and state authority may say something else. To avoid contradictions, they make it clear wherever there was a doubt, saying that this is goods, this is services. Now, the next question is on place of supply. Why do you require to determine place of supply? Everything is same. That is because of this intra-state and interstate IGST which is collected. If you are not in a position to determine the place of supply properly, then it is a destination based tax and you are going to pay tax into a wrong account.
So which tax the revenue has to?
Huh?
To which state the revenue has to?
Correct. That is why you have this place of supply which is specifically defined in the IGST Act, Section 6. So unless you determine the place of supply, you will not be in a position. If you look at the place of supply for goods is differently dealt. For services, it is a very long section. In fact, that itself will take about 2 hours. It depends on the, sometimes they look at the location of the receiver. Some places they look at the place where it is actually performed. For example, a train. Or if it is related to immovable property or hotel or inn or whatever, they look at the location of the immovable property. Or for insurance, there is a different treatment. So they have given various possibilities to ensure that you determine and pay, whether you treat it as interstate or intrastate and pay the appropriate tax. But whether for each and every transaction, are you in a position, they are supposed to decide this transaction is interstate, this transaction is intrastate. Your client sitting in Delhi may ask you some question, or you may go and advise. So you have to be clear as to what is, whether it is intrastate or interstate, and pay the appropriate tax. That is why the distinction is there. And in my view, Schedule 2 will ensure that disputes don't arise. In a way, it is good. Sir, you wanted to ask?
In an industry,
Yes.
like we have both the factors manufacturing and service. Like we take example of catering industry.
Printing.
Catering industry.
Yeah.
So what?
Catering.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens in that case? Most of the revenue portion is related to the sale of the goods, and only a minor sale is relating to the services. In that case, proportionate of the service tax input is reversed back, and only suppose it is 80-20, 80% is reversed back and 20% we take a credit. In the case, in the scenario of CST, and GST, will it be seen or how is it going to be?
Very interesting. In fact, we have a study circle which has about 10 leading professionals. We have been meeting since about 10 years. If you look at Schedule 2, in that list which you have about the declared services, deemed services, one particular clause, I think the last clause in that particular limb, talks about restaurant service, where it is deemed to be service. But it does not, in our view, when we look at it a little deeper, it may not cover a caterer. So for a caterer, that Schedule 2 may not be useful. So you may have to decide whether it is goods or services. We have to look at it from that angle. That Schedule 2 may not address the caterer's liability. So in which case, suppose the government has the power, central government can decide. You saw that supply definition. In such cases, if you bring it to the notice of the government, the council may also recommend and say, treat this as supply of goods or services. That will resolve the issue. It's a good observation. I think we can even take it up and so forth. Yes, sir.
So, in the current scenario of service tax, if a supplier, if a service provider has got 15 lakh of turnover, so
please repeat that. And
under the service tax, current service tax law, if a service provider has got 15 lakh of turnover per annum, he is liable to pay service tax, charge service tax, and pay to the government. Now, by migrating to GST, because that exemption limit is 20 lakhs.
Correct.
So does he have to continue with the charging of GST?
See, whether a person should avail exemption or not itself will be a point to be analyzed in depth. Financials are to be seen, and to whom he caters is also important. Now the rate is going to suddenly jump from 15% to 18 or 20 or whatever. That itself is a big hit on the service sector. Of course, they may take credit on the goods. The VAT credit was not available to service providers earlier. Now SGST credit is available. To a certain extent, it may offset. But some service providers, like advisory services, hardly use goods to render service. So this credit may not work. And suppose your customer is the end user. He is not a businessman. Let us say a retired pensioner comes and asks you to file his returns. For him, there is no credit system available. So there will be a lot of resistance under the GST regime if you suddenly start charging tax. On the other hand, if you cater if your major customers or business houses or corporates, they would not mind, because you are going to pass on the credit and they will take credit. But if you are working under exemptions, the problem is the cost which you incur on various inputs or capital goods or input services. Will you be in a position to absorb that cost? Let us say 20% is on those goods or services or inputs, inward supply. So you have to take a decision based on all these factors. Will you be in a position to withstand that cost? Earlier, service tax law started with 5%, the 8, 10, 12, again 10, like that they kept on working out. Now that they are going to start with a higher rate, are you in a position to take it as a cost if you work under exemption? That is a question to be decided individually by the person. It is not a blind, sir, if I avail this 20 lakhs, there is no problem. I will not register, I did not file returns. That is one thing. Can you survive in the business? One more thing which you have to look at. That every individual has to take a call. And for example, we are not under the GST, the service tax rate. It comes under reverse charge. Hopefully some reverse charge comes in GST also, so that we may not, we are tough customers for the department probably. So they have kept us outside the ambit of tax. So if reverse charge comes, then what happens to the cost which I am going to incur? So that will be one more question which we have to ask. So if you are claiming exemption, you have to look at all these aspects to decide whether to claim exemption or not. Yes, sir.
Presently, this legal service is not taxed.
Yes.
As per the Supreme Court. So in the GST regime, what is important?
See, exemptions will be and reverse charge will be decided by the GST Council, and probably they will adopt the same yardstick which was there in the context of present service tax regime. Take out those categories and say reverse charge will be applied. But when it comes to exemptions, they may try to curtail the number of exemptions under the GST regime, is what I would say. But the person who has to decide whether it is exempted or is under reverse charge will be the GST Council. They have not finalized anything on this. There is no indication. And we have to wait and see how it happens.
One more question is regarding the assessment for each company who has got different branches in different places. The assessment will be done in the principal business, or
since you are registered separately, it will be done separately at those places. So it cannot happen at one place.
It will happen.
Unlike LTU, in fact, the question is whether LTU concept will be relevant in GST regime. That itself we are not sure. What will happen to the infrastructure created across the country? It doesn't work. Last question, sir. I have been given in, which last you decide among yourself.
Definition of input, furtherance of the business, what is the meaning of that one? And second, is the use of that one commodity and then services used or any other material we are used, they will not we are selling, whether we are eligible for input.
It depends on who is the type of assessee. Let us say you are a service provider. You are using the material to render the service. Then, as per the definition, you should be given the benefit of credit. But if you are buying it as an end customer and you are not, there is no output supply from your end, then the question of taking credit does not arise, or if you are exempted. And that furtherance of business or commerce is a phrase which is, we saw it in the context of input service definition. So we have to establish that it is used or intended for use in the business of the particular person who is the assessor. We have to establish that. So in a way, I think they are bringing back that activities relating to business, which was there in the input service definition prior to 1/4/2000. So you establish some connection with your business, but it is made available. But wait for the rules. Rules will definitely have some restrictions on it. We are now reading only the Act. Act is not the end of all. We have rules and clarifications will come. It is very premature to reach any conclusion on that. Sir, you wanted to ask last question?
Just one. See, in case of import of goods, correct, we got the Customs Act which is applicable and therefore it is still existing, it doesn't get subsumed in the GST. In case of import of services, how is
IGST will apply.
IGST will apply. So we'll have to end up paying IGST. The recipient will have to pay same as the
same. I thank the institute and of course we have only, I would say that we have only generated interest in the subject and it is impossible to cover all the areas within the available time. I thank you for your generous listening. Thank you.
Friends, I thought I can forget service tax once the GST comes, because almost all the services come in under GST law. Unfortunately, after hearing the speakers, I cannot afford to forget that, because what he said is GST model law is cut, copy and paste of all the central excise, service tax and VAT laws. So we need to relearn the old law in a new format as GST law. That's what I felt, and maybe right or wrong. So the speaker touched upon some of the important points like transaction with related persons, assets used for personal uses, assets retained after re-registration, deregistration, transactions of exports under GST regime, and many more. Speaker also clarified lots of our doubts in the form of question and answer session and applicable to service sector and the GST regime. Let us thank the speaker with a round of applause. On behalf of Bangalore branch of SARC of ICI, let us present a memento to the speaker as a token of gratitude and appreciation. May I request the CA Kumar Solanki to come forward and present memento to the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the speaker with a round of applause. Thank you, CA Kumar Solanki. Let us break for tea and reassemble at 4:10 sharp to start the final session.